Hello, grade 8s. Today we're going to be learning more all about the comma, really. And so, to start off with, what's the better way to start off than with a good joke? So here we go. What's the difference between a cat and a comma? Well, a cat has claws at the end of its paws, and a comma is a pause at the end of a clause. Ba-dum-ba-ch. Yeah, that just happened. Before we get too deep into this, let's review a little bit and talk about some of the rules that we learned last week. So rule number 1 is use commas to separate 3 or more items in a series. And rule number 2 was to put a comma between independent clauses linked by fanboys. Now, do you remember fanboys? Now, fanboys, if you remember, is an acronym for something. So see if you can get it right. Did you get them right? You really want to know and be aware of these words because this is going to be something that's coming up all throughout high school in grammar lessons that are taught and gone over. So you want to make sure you learn this just so that you know how to distinguish between them. As you know from last week, fanboys, those are all conjunctions, which are really connecting words. And they come up very often in English, so they're things that you want to learn. But let's look at rule number 2 with some examples. It's really important to know your clauses. What is an independent clause? What is a dependent clause? Because these things will help you determine whether or not to use a comma. So in this example, you have the statement here. I went to the store to get ice cream and I was surprised that they didn't have any. So in this first part, I went to the store to get ice cream. You can see that because you have both a subject and a verb, I went, that is an independent clause. Then when you look at the second part of the sentence, and I was surprised that they didn't have any, you can see that actually here we also have a subject, I, and a verb, was surprised. And so as you can see in this example, here we have two independent clauses that are being linked, and you can see here, and is your fanboys conjunction. So with that in mind, you would indeed want to put a comma right here. I went to the store to get ice cream, and I was surprised that they didn't have any. But let's look at another example. So again, I went to the store to get ice cream, and was surprised that they didn't have any. Now in this situation, the first part is a sentence. I went to the store to get ice cream. It's an independent clause. But the second part, was surprised that they didn't have any, is actually a verb clause because it does not have a subject. So here, the I at the beginning of the sentence is actually going to be applied to this second part as well because this part does not have a subject. And so in that, I was surprised that they didn't have any. Here, you don't have two independent clauses being linked, and therefore there's no comma, even though you've got your fanboys conjunction and. Let's take a look at the last example. So here we have, I went to the store to get ice cream because the last store didn't have any. Now here, we do actually have two independent clauses. I went to the store. I went is the subject and verb. And then, actually, the next subject is the last store. Didn't is the verb. And so here, you would think, oh yeah, I'm going to put a comma here, right? Right after ice cream. However, because is not a fanboys conjunction. And therefore, actually, you don't have a comma here. I know, pretty crazy. But that's part of the reason why you need to learn those fanboys conjunctions. What are they again? Remind yourself. Let's talk a little bit about non-fanboys conjunctions, or what are in grammar terms called subordinating conjunctions. When you think about it, if somebody in an office has a subordinate, okay, that means that actually that person is below the other person. So one person is in a sense above the other person. So when you have an independent clause or a subordinating clause, you have a situation where the independent clause can stand on its own. However, the subordinating clause actually cannot. And a subordinating conjunction or a connection between two sentences that subordinates something makes one, in a sense, less than the other one. Does that make sense? Let's go through some of these examples so it's really clear. So in each and every one of these examples, we have independent clauses. So here, I was thinking of dinner, right here. I was thinking of dinner and I was driving. Both of those are independent clauses, okay? And as you can see, right here is the fanboys conjunction and, so you've got a comma right there. I was thinking of dinner and I was driving. However, in the next sentence, here we have it, I was thinking of dinner while I was driving. Now, both of these are still independent clauses. However, while is a subordinating conjunction. It is not a fanboys conjunction. And because of that, there is no comma here. Okay? In the next example, I knew I would succeed, but there were obstacles. Again, but is a fanboys conjunction. You can see it in the blue there, and that means there is a comma right there. However, in the next sentence, which again also is independent clauses, here we have it, I knew I would succeed although there were obstacles. Although is a subordinating conjunction, making one part of the sentence more important or less important or contingent on the other part. And because of that, there's no comma right there. In the last example here, I decided to order an entire meal instead of just a burger, for I was hungry. For, again, is the fanboys conjunction, so you've got a comma right there. But in the next sentence, which is the same except for the conjunction used, they're using the subordinating conjunction because, and as a result of that, there is no comma located right there. Do you see? Now we're going to watch a short video to give a bit of an overview about what else you can think about in rules relating to the comma. So, as you can see from the video, you do not need to use a comma if you're linking two independent clauses with non-fanboys conjunctions. They are really just strong enough without the help of a comma. So in that sense, I've created Rule 2.5, which is kind of an extension of Rule 2. And here's a few examples to have us actually work through them. So in the example here, the first one, I had so much fun in socials yesterday because I got to run around with a shield. Here you have two different independent clauses, okay? So I had so much fun in socials yesterday is an independent clause, and I got to run around with a shield is also an independent clause. The reason why you know that? Pop quiz. Yes, because both of them have a subject and a verb, okay? I had and I got to run. And in that sense, here we have two independent clauses, and there is a non-fanboys conjunction or a subordinating conjunction because of that, we do not have a comma here. So that right there is wrong. We're going to take that away. There you go. In the next example, I felt rested in the morning, even though I only got 5 hours of sleep. Here, again, you've got a situation where you've got two independent clauses. Why? Again, because you have a subject and a verb in both sentences, and even though is not a fanboys conjunction, and therefore there is no comma here. So again, we're going to erase that because that does not exist. In the last example here, we have the sentence, I started my homework late this evening since I had volleyball after school. As you can see again, I started my homework late this evening is an independent clause because there is a subject, I, and started, verb. And then also, I had volleyball after school is also an independent clause because of the subject here, and the verb. Since, again, is a non-fanboys conjunction, so again, does the comma go here? No, it does not. Moving on to rule number 3. In this rule, we want to put a comma after an introductory word, phrase, or a dependent clause that comes before an independent clause. So as you can see in this example, we've got the word slow animal crossing in both instances. The one with the horse has the word slow and then a comma to indicate that the person themselves that is seeing the sign is supposed to then be going slower. Whereas in the next sign over to the right, you have the situation where slow animal crossing implies that there is a slow animal that is crossing the street. It is not a directive for the person reading the sign, but rather it is actually just communicating what type of animal is crossing. So slow in that instance is actually describing the animal. So let's practice a little bit more with rule number 3. So here we have some examples for rule number 3. To start off with, let's talk about introductory words. So in this first one, Rob, you aren't paying attention, is essentially just an introductory word. Rob is emphasized in this sentence. Rob, you aren't paying attention. Come on now. And in the second sentence here we have, again, another introductory word. Seriously, you didn't hear a word I said. Seriously, you didn't hear a word I said. These are examples of introductory words. And then another way that you'd have a comma integrated into this situation is with introductory phrases. So with introductory phrases, here we've got the example, after the show, we got ice cream. Another example would be, exhausted and cranky from staying up all night, I staggered into class. So here are introductory phrases. And then we have introductory dependent clauses. Now these are different because these are actually dependent clauses. This is a subordinating conjunction, which actually makes this full sentence, I got my hair done, subordinate to the independent clause, I ate a piece of chicken. While I got my hair done, comma, I ate a piece of chicken. Again, in the second sentence, here you've got until, which is a subordinating conjunction to the sentence, she got her promotion. And this then makes that a subordinating sentence to the independent clause, which is she was quite friendly. Right? And so in these instances, you have to have a comma to separate, as the video talked about. So here, let's actually practice this a little bit. Let's have you try this out. So in this first example, there is one specific place that you would want to put a comma. And the reason why you would want to put a comma right after the word remember in the sentence, remember, a clear conscience is often just a sign of poor memory, is because remember is an introductory word. In the next sentence, until I received a raise, I didn't think my manager appreciated my efforts. Now, did you catch it? Until is a subordinating conjunction. It's not a fanboys conjunction. And because of that, until I received a raise, you're going to put the comma right after raise because that separates the subordinating clause, I received a raise, until I received a raise, and the main clause, the independent clause, I didn't think my manager appreciated my efforts. In this next sentence, we have an example of an introductory phrase. No matter how much I practice my singing, never gets any better. So we need to add grammar here, add a punctuation mark so that this sentence makes more sense. No matter how much I practice, comma, my singing never gets any better. No matter how much I practice is an example of an introductory phrase, and so we have to put the comma after that before the independent clause, my singing never gets any better. In this next sentence as well, again, we've got a situation where we have a subordinating conjunction, a subordinating connector word, and that's where if you think nobody cares, try missing a few payments. In this situation, if the subordinating conjunction, you think nobody cares, comma, try missing a few payments. If you think nobody cares is a subordinating clause to the independent clause, try missing a few payments, because try missing a few payments is a directive. It is has an implied subject, or why don't you try missing a few payments? In the next sentence, when everything is coming your way, you're in the wrong lane. When everything is coming your way, comma, you're in the wrong lane. This is an example of an introductory phrase, and that's where you have to put the comma in that sentence. In the last sentence, if Barbie is so popular, why do you have to buy friends for her? In this situation, if, again, is what? It's a subordinating conjunction. So if Barbie is so popular, comma, why do you have to buy friends for her? That's where the comma goes in that situation, because that is a dependent clause. If Barbie is so popular, comma, why do you have to buy friends for her? Here is rule number 4, and it says, use commas to set off any word, phrase, or dependent clause that is not essential to the main idea of the sentence. So below here we have two sentences about the children having ice cream. But in the first sentence we have no commas, and in it, it says, the children who were dressed in costumes had ice cream. And this implies that only the children wearing costumes actually ate the ice cream. In the second sentence, there are a couple commas that have been added, and these commas essentially change the meaning of the sentence. The children, who were dressed in costumes, had ice cream. Essentially what these commas have done is they've eliminated this portion of the message as being the core piece. In the first sentence, only the children wearing the costumes ate the ice cream. In the second sentence, all of the children wore costumes and had ice cream. Okay? Now, we can actually simplify this because those two commas break the sentence up and actually mean that you could actually take that whole center section, this section right here, you could actually remove it. And you would just have the sentence, the children had ice cream. So, in other words, all of the children had ice cream. Does that make sense? Let's clarify a little bit further. When you separate a word, phrase, or clause with commas, it actually changes the entire meaning of the sentence. The commas make what is separated clarifying or non-essential information. For example, the volleyball game, which was held at the high school, was very intense. Well, the portion in the yellow, which was held at the high school, is actually not essential to the sentence itself. The sentence can stand without that clarifying portion. That portion in yellow is just to add emphasis or add ideas or clarification. The volleyball was very intense, regardless of whether we know as the readers that this sentence, the game was actually held at the high school. Non-essential means that it could be taken out of the sentence and the sentence would actually still work. Here's some more examples for rule number 4. In this first one, it says, Alice Munro, one of Canada's best-known novelists, spends the summer in Clinton. Now, this sentence is actually almost hard to read based on the way that the sentence has been put together without commas. Alice Munro, one of Canada's best-known novelists, spends the summer in Clinton. What is this sentence actually trying to say? Well, number 1, her last name should be a capital, okay? So Alice Munro is clearly the subject of the sentence. But where is the verb? The verb is actually way over here. Spends the summer in Clinton is the actual sentence. So this section right in the middle, one of Canada's best-known novelists, is actually, the purpose of it is to clarify, okay? Because Alice Munro spends the summer in Clinton is the main sentence, and this section in the middle, one of Canada's best-known novelists, only adds information, okay? It clarifies. Similarly, in this next sentence, the Queen, who has twice as many birthdays as anyone else, officially celebrates her birthday on May 24th. The Queen is the subject, who has twice as many birthdays as anyone else, does what? She officially celebrates her birthday on May 24th. This section in the middle is simply clarifying. So because of that, we actually have to add commas. Here we go, like that. Oh, forgive me, I'm not used to this app. Oh, and I forgot to actually add the commas in the first sentence. Teacher fail, oh no. Here we go. Alice Munro, comma, one of Canada's best-known novelists, comma, spends the summer in Clinton. And then the Queen, comma, who has twice as many birthdays as anyone else, comma, officially celebrates her birthday on May 24th. Now, in this last sentence, writing a good letter of application isn't difficult if you're careful. What's the main independent clause here? It's this first part. Writing a good letter of application isn't difficult if you're careful, okay? It doesn't matter whether or not you're careful. However, it actually does add clarification to this sentence. Writing a good letter of application isn't difficult. Yeah, that's true. But it's also true if you're careful in doing it. So writing a good letter of application is much better if you take time to put time into it and are diligent and are careful. If you're careful, this sentence here is just clarifying. As a little tip, to test whether a word, phrase, or clause is essential to the sentence, try putting parentheses around it and see if the sentence still makes sense. If it does, it's not essential. All right, let's see you practice. So just to review, here are the 4.5 common rules about the comma. Rule number 1, use commas to separate 3 or more items in a series. Rule number 2, put a comma between independent clauses linked by fanboys. Rule 2.5, you do not need to use a comma if you're linking 2 independent clauses with a non-fanboys conjunction or a subordinate conjunction. Rule number 3, put a comma after an introductory word, phrase, or dependent clause. And rule number 4, use commas to set off non-essential information. For this activity, you will need to use all 4.5 comma rules to add commas to these sentences. Let's see how you do. Now, try and apply commas where they are needed in this paragraph.